Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I've been going out with a girl, her name is Julie, but last night she said to me when we were watching telly.
Jeremy Hunt seems at least sensible. I don't know, I'm struggling. Over to you, all right? Miles is in Alperton. Miles, pick a candidate. Tell me something good about them.
Hi, I'm supporting Dominic Raab in this election because I believe if the Tories get this vote wrong, that could be the end of Tories as a party as we know it.
Yeah, you need to tell me a positive about Dominic Raab based on his record.
Okay, well, I'm one of those flat earthers, and I do fundamentally disagree with most of what you say, but I do listen to you every day.
Yes, a positive about Dominic Raab based on his track record.
Yeah, I think he's a strong enough candidate because I think he's not deluded in the fact of reopening a negotiation.
Who with?
And he's got with the EU.
But who will be negotiating on their behalf?
Exactly. So it's not happening, and he's not positioned himself in that regard. He's completely positioned himself to be leaving on a no deal.
No, he hasn't.
Well, I watched him on the Andrew Marr show the other day. And
he said he will try to renegotiate the withdrawal agreement.
Yeah,
but so who with? Who will he be doing that with?
Well, exactly. But he's
hang on. What do you mean exactly? When he said we will try to renegotiate the withdrawal agreement, in fact, I think the word he uses is that we need to be tougher. Let's leave aside for the moment. What was his job before he resigned? What was his last job in the cabinet?
Former Brexit secretary.
Oh, yeah, but obviously Secretary of States of Brexit can't have anything to do with negotiations. When he said he would toughen up the negotiating strategy, who would be on the other side of the table, Miles?
Well, I would have thought that if we had had an election and we have a strong no-deal leader who's committed to that...
but he's not committed to it, is he? He said in circumstances where we haven't managed to secure a better deal, I am prepared to leave with no deal on October the 31st. So in the process of trying to secure a better deal, who will be on the other side of the negotiating table?
No, I agree with you, James.
How can you agree with the question? Who will be on the other side of the negotiating table?
I agree. There probably won't be anyone. There won't be renegotiating.
So when he says in public that he's going to renegotiate, what's he doing? Is he not understanding what you understand, or is he pretending not to understand what you understand and seeking to mislead the voters? And I would remind you that you're supposed to be giving us reasons why you support him.
No, I do agree with you.
But I haven't said anything. I've just asked you questions. Miles, let's make one little agreement here, okay? Yeah. If I ask you a question, you can't say, I agree with you. You have to answer it. So I'll ask you again. We seem to have accepted that when he says he's going to reopen negotiations, he is either being incompetent or dishonest. If he's being incompetent, he doesn't understand what you understand, that there's no one to renegotiate with. If he's being dishonest, he's trying to persuade people that there is someone to renegotiate, even though he knows that there isn't. So which do you think it is, dishonest or incompetent? And I would remind you that you're here to cheerlead for him.
I would go with neither. I would think when we get a new Prime Minister elected...
Right, I'm going to have to do this again, because you have said yourself that if he wants to reopen negotiations, there will be nobody to negotiate with. So when he says that he's going to negotiate more toughly, is he pretending not to understand that, or does he genuinely not understand that? Is he being deceitful, or is he being incompetent? And again, I'd remind you that you're here to give us positive.
To support him. We'll go with incompetence. Since that's
okay, well, there you go. So our first caller today is on Dominic Raab's team because he thinks he's incompetent. Martin's in Portsmouth. What would you like to say?
Hello. I'd like to say that Boris is transparent.
Transparently dishonest?
Yeah.
Oh,
that's
okay.
what I like. The other day you were asking, do we like to be lied to? And
yes.
I tried to call in about Trump. And I was going to say that his narcissism causes him to say black is white in the same sentence. And it's the same with Boris. The fact that he says what's on the front of his mind and gets himself into hot water all the time as a result of it, at least allows us to know what he's thinking.
So because he's a narcissistic liar, you like him?
Yeah, because I can read him. Whereas the ones that are more guarded, the more guarded politicians that tell you one thing while secretly...
Just wait a minute, because oddly, the positive I have for Boris Johnson is a bit similar to yours, but I suspect one of us is not making sense. It could be me, it could be you. The reason I am not as spooked by Boris Johnson as perhaps I might be is because I can't trust a word that he says. So even if he says today that we'll come out on October the 31st with no deal if we have to, I don't believe him. I think at every turn he'll do whatever suits him best, and sacrificing the country upon the altar of a ludicrous policy won't suit him best. So I quite like Boris Johnson, precisely because if he says today that he's going to bring you sandwiches for tea, you know that by lunchtime he'll be saying the polar opposite. How do you derive confidence from the fact that you can't trust a word he says, Martin?
But James, I don't. What I'm saying is exactly what you've just said.
Oh, okay.
And
so we're both making sense.
Yeah,
but I don't really want a prime minister. I don't really want a prime minister if you can't trust a word that he says.
I don't trust anyone in the entire body politic at the moment. And
that's a little bit silly.
Well, that's the way it feels.
What about all the people who correctly predicted what would happen in the event of a Brexit vote? Why don't you trust them?
I trust what they predicted, but the chap in charge of the Bank of England, you were using his as an example of saying it's all going to go horribly wrong. He knew what was going to happen, or predicted what was going to happen, took steps, and all of a sudden everything wasn't quite so bad. In fact, there was a little bit of growth as opposed to recession.
He's not a politician, of course. So again, I'd ask you, in terms of not trusting anyone in the body politic. Yes, he is, and he moved heaven and earth to minimise the impact of his own predictions. But in terms of politicians, all the ones who said, for example, now that Andrea Leadsom, have we got that clip? Have we got that? Just listen to this.
Are willing to go for no deal, though, ultimately.
You have to be. So in any negotiation, you have to be prepared to walk away.
OK, so are you willing to go for no deal even if somebody loses their job? Can you guarantee that nobody will lose their job in the event of a no-deal
nobody
Brexit?
can ever guarantee that nobody will lose their job. People lose their jobs and gain new jobs every single day of the week.
But do you think there's a risk of people losing their jobs in the event of a no-deal Brexit?
I think in the event of a no-deal Brexit, there will be winners and losers. There will be winners and losers. There will be winners and losers, and there will be some short-term disruption. I am not an advocate of no deal.
Is it worth it for someone to lose their job?
The democracy of our nation is worth everything. The people took a decision, and we have to deliver on that. And
but hang on, they didn't necessarily take a decision to leave the EU without a deal. Well, and if they knew that was the option in front of them,
they were not asked. They were asked whether to leave the EU or remain within the EU.
Absolutely, but if they'd known there was a risk of them losing their jobs in the event of a no-deal Brexit, do you think they would have?
All of that was made very, very clear.
So you should trust them, shouldn't you?
No, I don't trust them because.
But they were right.
They may be right, but they're self-serving.
Well, what's your basis for trust them? They're not even there anymore. George Osborne's editing the Evening Standard, and David Cameron's in his caravan.
My basis for trust would have been someone who acted on the people's mandate to leave the EU and to negotiate hard.
But
and the hard negotiation would have been... Well, they didn't. No, they really didn't.
All right.
They really didn't.
OK, so we're going to be tougher. We're going to be tougher.
We should have been tough from the outset. We've already shown our weakness now, which has damaged us enormously.
Right.
And
so what would toughness have looked like?
Toughness would have looked like, thank you very much, we're off, we're not paying you a penny, and then we'll deal with the rest of the world. When you want our services or want our products, come to us.
All right, sweetheart. Have a great day. It's coming up to 10:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Just believe and be tough, and they'll have rolled over and done what we wanted. And I tell you, the problem was we put those pesky Remainers in the big jobs, David Davis and Dominic Raab. Why did we make them Secretaries of State for negotiating? But I tell you what we should have done. Should have made Boris Johnson Foreign Secretary. Shouldn't we? And then at least they'd have had a chance to deliver this mythical Brexit that poor souls like him still think was ever achievable.
Though some of that money is not spent, as there is a rush at the end of the year to spend it. We know places have their own, whether it's space programmes. We know airports have been built and actually the runways are in the wrong direction because of the winds. What we are saying is there are vulnerable...
Where has that happened?
There are vulnerable people back at home. It's in one of the continents abroad. We know we've got that airport where we can't take off and land because of the winds, the crosswinds there. But what we've got, Iain, is people in the UK who are the most vulnerable here.
Johnson now, because my life has changed. I'm allowed to.
and I'm going to. But for the purposes of a proper conversation in which there's an exchange of views, you're allowed to give yours as well and tell me how marvellous he is. So why don't you? Fire away.
I certainly will. Thank you for the opportunity. Yes, Boris the Brave, Boris the Beautiful. He is definitely going to be the best Prime Minister for this country. He will negotiate, unlike the spineless politicians that exist on both sides, mostly on the Labour side. But I think he will be powerful, persuasive, and I think he's absolutely right not to accept a situation where we must have a deal. Must have a deal would imply at all costs. No, not at all costs. I think he will be negotiating strongly with conviction, and I salute the man, and I think he's done a great deal for London. I think he's demonstrated that he can achieve things. Yes, he has some eccentricities, and yes, he does have some occasional gaffes, but at the end of the day, we're a bit of an eccentric nation, and I live up north of England, and we like to call a spade a spade. So
well, yeah, I'm only from up the road from you, Richard, and I managed all my life to call a spade without being massively and deliberately offensive to people in the doing of it.
Or overly sensitive, perhaps. No, I don't think that he has done anything. And if he feels that he might have stepped a little bit out of line, respect to the guy, he's apologised. Tell me a politician that hasn't made a gaffe. Tell me whether you've made a gaffe or I've not made a gaffe. We all have.
Okay, let's focus on the deal. You think he's the man who can deliver the mythical deal that Theresa May was unable to deliver. All he said in the press conference, and I'd be keen to hear if you heard differently to this, it seems to me he said in the press conference was, I won't campaign for no deal, but we must prepare for one all the same. I've got my notes in front of me here. We will engage in the friendliest way possible with our European friends, but we will be a government with a new mandate. Not quite true, because it's not going to the people. A new earnestness, a new optimism, a new confidence. What does that amount to in terms of this negotiation that you believe he can achieve? Because there's no detail there, is there?
Oh, I think there is.
Is there? Go on.
I think there is. I think he's very specific.
Is he?
If you're the European Union and I'm Boris Johnson, I will engage with you in the most civil way, in the most friendly way I possibly can.
And do you think Theresa May didn't?
Sorry, I hadn't finished my sentence. So I would engage with him in the most civil way.
Who's sensitive now, Richard?
Well, I think, please don't cut me in the middle of the sentence. I would do it in a positive and friendly way, the view being that unless we can achieve a workable conclusion and outcome, we will walk away from the table. And I think that's a great position to adopt.
Except we won't, will we? Because Parliament's going to make sure we don't, and he knows that, and he's saying stuff anyway, and you're falling for it.
I'm not falling for anything, Sheila. I hope you're not either. No, the reality is that if we do not have a situation that is acceptable to Boris as our future Prime Minister, and on the 31st of October he says, well, we have warned you, we would walk away from the deal, and he actually implements.
But he isn't the only candidate doing that. Lots of the candidates are saying that, aren't they?
But they're not all Prime Minister, so he's going to be the Prime Minister, hopefully, and he will be the one that will be speaking.
Well, he's not yet. But what is it about? But what is it about him above and beyond the others who are saying I'll accept no deal? Andrea Leadsom, for example.
Because he is a more persuasive, he's a stronger, he's a more powerful, and he is someone that I can trust, and I think he's someone that people can trust. He will deliver what he says. He'll not compromise, and if Parliament then decide that they won't accept that and we have a general election, well, then be it on the heads of those who have not respected the vote, the democratic vote of this country to get out of the European Union. Enough procrastination, enough deliberation, let's get out. And he's the man to do it. And I think it's wrong and unfair to disrespect him.
Thank you, Richard, for your call. Richard in Manchester. Jill in Cornwall. Hello.
Hello. I'm horrified what I'm listening to. From Ben Bradshaw and the like. When people voted, they did not vote for a deal. There was no question on the form to say, do we leave with a deal, half a deal, some things, do we leave with nothing? It was in or out. And the majority of people that voted, 17.2 million, I believe, voted to leave. And it was the Remain part of Parliament and politicians that decided that they would negotiate a deal before we leave.
But Jill, the campaign leading up to the voting day was all about deals.
It wasn't on the ballot form.
So you disregard everything politicians say up until the point of the ballot?
Every politician has a reason for what they say. And it's usually...
And you should listen. You should listen to what they say, Jill.
You
should listen to what they say.
What they would particularly
You should listen to what they say, because if you don't, forgive me, it isn't against you. If you don't listen to what somebody who wants your vote says and challenge them on it, you are a dolt. Not you. One is. If you don't listen,
I had my own reasons for why I voted, and everyone who voted had their reasons. Nothing was to say.
That doesn't. But Jill, that doesn't take away from the fact. That doesn't take away from the fact that they campaigned on a deal, the easiest deal in history, the easiest trade deal, quickest trade deal. We could have Norway, we could have Canada, we could have this, we could have that. Never anyone said, we'll just fall off a cliff at the end. It'll be no deal. We'll just scarper. Nobody said that.
The majority of people that voted to leave, and we would negotiate deals, finances, money, trade deals, you name it, customs, whatever, afterwards.
How do you know? Have you spoken to 17.4 million people? Have you spoken to them all?
Because everyone would have had their own view on what they would.
And they might have been different to yours.
There wasn't any of that.
But it may have been different to your view.
We would talk about deals afterwards. We've literally shot ourselves in the foot by saying that we would negotiate a deal before we step out the door. That gives all the onus on the EU to decide how we leave, with what we leave, what they will allow us to have.
But Jill, it was the nature of the campaigns to leave.
The campaign was to stay or go. Not how we
The campaign was to get a deal with these lovely neighbours of ours, but be outside the... It was.
No, but it wasn't. It was. The question was, do we...
I know what the question was, but the campaign. I'm talking about the campaign.
Yes, I realise some people will have listened to one side of the argument. Depending on who you feel is your politician, who you feel aligned with, will determine on how you and who you listen to.
But somebody who wanted to leave or thought they might, give leaving the European Union some mental space and consider putting their ex alongside the word leave, would have listened to what was said during that campaign and thought it won't be so bad because we'll be able to make the easiest trade deal in history, the quickest trade deal in history. Let's leave. It'll be good for us. Fresh start. Let's leave. What nobody was told was what's happened.
But what has happened? What has happened? Tell me what has actually happened as a result of the British public voting.
Well, what's happened is we're facing the very thing you say you voted for, which is no deal. We are.
Depending on who you talk to.
Well,
if you talk to some people that support the Brexit deal, some people who want the break, some people who want to leave, they will tell you the positives.
So a parliament that's trying to stop no deal is what, in your view?
Leaving with no deal.
Yeah, a parliament that is trying to stop that from happening.
Well, those are all politicians who don't want to leave in the first place. They will do. It's like having a divorce, isn't it? I want the divorce, you don't. And because you don't, if you're going to negotiate the deal on how the divorce takes place, you will do it in your favour as opposed to in mine. I'm bound to come off worse.
So you support Boris Johnson, do you, as Prime Minister?
Yes, I do.
I do. If we reach a point, and it's entirely possible that we will, reach a point where Parliament is successfully blocking no deal, whether Boris Johnson wants it or you want it or not, and we are not getting a deal successfully over the line in Parliament. We're not getting a deal over the line. What would you like to happen then? Would you like a general election? Would you like a second go at the referendum? Would you like more extensions, more of this sort of limbo that we're in?
If I'm honest with you, I think we just need to go. We just need to do what we said we were going to do.
But what I'm putting to you is that has been... But what I'm putting to you, Jill, is that will have been made impossible by Parliament.
By Parliament that is basically more Remainers than Leavers.
I know, but I'm asking you to think beyond that point and tell me what you'd like to happen then.
Well, as I said, I would like us to leave the EU.
Well, you can't think beyond that point, is what you're telling me. Jill, thank you. Jill in Cornwall.
Johnny's in Buckinghamshire. Johnny, what would you like to say?
Is this me?
I don't know. Are you called Johnny?
Yeah, I did.
And are you in Buckinghamshire?
And
have you rung LBC in the last 20 minutes hoping to get onto the James O'Brien programme?
Yes, thank you very much.
Right, then we've narrowed it down, and I think it's almost certainly you.
Marvellous. Okay, which of your points would you like?
Whatever you rang in to talk about.
I rang in to tell you that the point of leaving a no deal on the table is an internationally accepted negotiating tactic. Which
so what previous international negotiation would you point to as a precedent for this?
One doesn't spring to mind. I'm talking through.
But you said it was internationally recognised. I just want one example of where walking away from a negotiation involves walking to a completely new status quo as opposed to returning to the old one. Just one example, Johnny.
Hang on, you're misinterpreting what I'm trying to get across. The reason
it's
you're going to
possible,
leave
but unlikely. I just want you to answer the question, because I like these phrases like internationally recognised, and you sort of glibly deliver it as if that somehow excludes you from having to explain what you mean. So if it's internationally recognised, there'll be loads of examples of negotiations where two parties engage in discussions, and if one of them elects to walk away from those discussions without having arrived at a deal, they don't go back to the status quo that they inhabited prior to the negotiations. They go back to a completely new and largely unknown status quo. So what's the example you've got of that?
Okay, great. New, unknown. Good.
So the example that you use to claim that it's internationally recognised, this tactic you describe, what examples can you offer us?
Let's move on from internationally recognised.
Well, only if you admit that it was a ludicrous phrase to you. No? Okay, here we go. So it's not internationally recognised.
Well, it's international
because no one has ever done it.
America and Australia.
Because no one has ever done it.
Look, I'm not a historian.
Well, then don't come on national radio and tell my listeners, who are intelligent and deserving of a lot more respect, stuff that you know to be untrue.
No, hang on. I was calling about your car analogy and going to a dealership and then leaving with a no deal or anything.
Yes.
That made absolutely no sense in what we're talking about in the bigger picture.
I'm not responsible for your intelligence.
Well, thank God for that. Next, the point of moving into an unknown is because when we made the decision, rightly or wrongly, to leave Europe, we wanted to leave the controls they have over us and also the other 60 nations, or 40 nations or whatever, who are not productive and basically rely on Germany,
40 nations in the European Union.
I can bring Google back up and work out the exact numbers.
You don't need Google. There's 28 currently, of which we're one. So there are 27 other nations. And let's pick up on that word you used, control. So what is it that we can't do at the moment that we'll be able to do when we don't have any trade agreements in place at all?
Set our own customs limits. Set our own customs tariffs.
We can't do that under World Trade Organization most favoured nation status. As soon as we offer or impose one thing on one country, we have to impose it on every country in the WTO. You can find this on Google.
That's fine, but as a sole trader and a businessman, we will still end up being able to trade. Where we're forgetting is that
the question is, how will it be better?
Uncharted territory.
How will it be better than what we currently have?
The world can change.
So that the world can change?
So that generally we can move into a new phase of even greater global trade and move away
so
from
by leaving the biggest single market on the planet, walking away from 81 established free trade agreements and countless other attendant arrangements and treaties, we'll be able to trade more than we currently do.
We will be able to trade more than we currently do.
Okay, Johnny. I think we use different Googles. I think we use different Googles. So tell me the thing that is going to be the fly in the ointment of your plan, the reason why this unicorn land won't happen. Is it because of EU intransigence or lefties?
The people who are negotiating on our behalf are politicians and civil servants and people who are not business savvy.
Yes.
Okay?
For example, people who know that there are 28 members in the European Union rather than people who think there are 40. We should have people who think there are 40 countries in the European Union doing the negotiations. Is that what you're telling us? Because that's what I've taken away from this conversation. You don't think they know what they're talking about, but you can't even count. It's a bit like Groundhog Day. If we crash out of the European Union with no deal whatsoever, something it's very important we leave on the table, because although we know it will do us incredible harm, it will scare the other lot into changing their mind and abandoning their negotiating position of the last 3 years and somehow doing something else. But we'll be okay. Can you give me some proof that we'll be okay? Well, of course we'll be okay. We won't sink under the waves. But the whole point of Brexit is to improve the situation that we're currently in. So how can you improve the current situation by making it worse? Whether you want to say short-term worse or not. How do you improve a status quo by making it worse? And I guess if you don't ask yourself these questions before you ring in, you end up sounding like Johnny in Buckinghamshire. And no one wants to sound like Johnny in Buckinghamshire. Brian is in Edmonton. Brian, you said you don't know a lot about politics, but you know a lot about negotiating.
Yeah, I've been in sales, I suppose. Well, I'm not in sales at the moment, but I was in sales for 25 years. I spent 13 years selling to people, face-to-face, and I spent 12 years selling to businesses at the very highest level. My favourite sale by far was, and the most successful sale that I ever had, and I used it multiple times, was walking away from the deal.
Now, if you walked away from a deal, where did you end up?
With the deal.
Okay. If you walked away from the deal, you don't end up with the deal. If you walk away from the deal, you've got to be prepared to have no deal. You're familiar with the phrase "no deal." It's kind of informing the entire conversation in the country at the moment, and certainly on this programme. No, I don't. I want you to tell me if you end up with no deal at all. What was the status quo?
I never ended up with no deal when I went to walk away from the deal. Never, not once.
Okay.
So would you like me to explain it to you?
No, I understand what you're saying. You're saying we're going to threaten to walk away with no deal, and that will make the EU do more of what we want.
I'm not talking about the EU.
Well, why have you phoned me then, Brian?
Because you asked about why go in with a no-deal negotiation.
No, not a no-deal negotiation, with no deal. And you phoned me up to say you never ended up with no deal. You're the polar opposite of someone with something to contribute to this conversation.
Yeah, but I always went for no deal. It's a different situation in sales. But
it's completely different, Brian, which is the point I've been making all morning. If you are negotiating to flog fridges and you threaten to walk away, but the bloke really needs fridges, he might invite you back and reopen negotiations because your situation doesn't change. You're exactly where you were before you started negotiating. If we walk away from the European Union with no deal, we are not going back to where we were when we started. We are going back to a country that doesn't currently exist, a country with no free trade agreements, a country with no customs union membership, a country with no single market membership, and a country that has literally nothing in the file marked free trade agreement. So do you see why it's completely different from all the sales negotiations you undertook in your glittering career?
It really isn't.
Okay. Well, you could have just said, no, I can't see it, James. Thomas is in Windlesham. Thomas, what would you like to say?
Hello. I just wanted to make the point, really, that the reason no deal has to stay on the table is that what we voted for in 2016. We talk about hard and soft Brexit, terms that only really came about after the referendum.
No, they didn't.
And a hard Brexit is a no-deal Brexit, yes.
Well, no deal didn't appear in the national vocabulary until about October of 2016.
David Cameron said would leave on WTO terms.
The pledge in the vote leave, yes, but David Cameron lost, which means people didn't believe him. So the vote leave people, the vote leave catalogue said categorically, we will negotiate the best available deal.
Yes, and the best available deal isn't very good. It's not what we wanted. A soft Brexit.
No, but people who voted for vote leave voted for the deal that they said would be negotiated.
No,
you might not have done, but you can't claim that 17.5 million people voted to jump off a cliff.
I think that 17.5 million people voted to leave the institutions of the European Union.
And Michael Gove voted for the withdrawal agreement, and Boris Johnson voted for the withdrawal agreement. So just accommodate those two facts into your analysis, if you will.
Of course they did. That's why I'm no longer a Conservative and I'm voting for the Brexit Party.
Brilliant. So you can't claim to speak for 17.4 million people if both of the chairmen of Vote Leave voted for the withdrawal agreement, which is why we need to put it back to the people.
Because the argument.
So you can speak for everyone who voted to leave, but the men who ran the Leave campaign can't.
Well, yes, but Boris Johnson and Michael Gove are both saying that they're prepared to leave the European Union on the 31st of October.
They are now, and they both voted for both voted for the withdrawal agreement as well. So there's no consistency there.
Because there was essentially a gun put to their head, and that they were threatened with no Brexit at all. this is why they voted for it. A soft Brexit isn't Brexit. We voted to leave.
And which campaigner prior to the campaign would you point to as representing that position? Was it because Nigel Farage, of course, said we could be like Norway or Switzerland? Is that hard Brexit or soft Brexit?
Of course, Norway and Switzerland is a soft Brexit.
So Nigel Farage was campaigning for a soft Brexit then?
No, Nigel Farage.
So what did he mean when he said we could be like Switzerland or Norway?
I don't know what he meant, but
I do, Thomas. He meant we could be like Switzerland or Norway, which you know, because you just said it, means a soft Brexit, which you claimed 2 minutes previously absolutely nobody voted for. So anybody who listened to Nigel Farage and voted to leave in expectation of being like Norway or Switzerland was voting for what you describe as a soft Brexit, and now you're telling me that nobody voted for a soft Brexit. Just run me through the logic of that, would you?
Okay, so how do you...
No, don't ask questions, just run me through the logic of what you've said.
What's your question, sorry?
No, I can't do this, mate. Sorry. But actually, do you know, I will. You've said that Norway and Switzerland is a soft Brexit. Nigel Farage, while campaigning, said we could be like Norway and Switzerland. Ergo, he campaigned for a soft Brexit. You said nobody who voted to leave the European Union voted for a soft Brexit. I'm suggesting that for many people, Nigel Farage is seen as someone who persuaded them to vote to leave. So if they voted because he told them it could be like Norway and Switzerland, they voted for a soft Brexit. Logically, how can you now claim that nobody voted for a soft Brexit?
He mentioned, Norway and Switzerland, and that was a possible model of Brexit.
A soft Brexit. So how can you claim that nobody voted for something he told people they could have?
Are you claiming that Nigel Farage is a soft Brexit?
It's another question. I'm claiming that Nigel Farage will say whatever pops into his head at the first opportunity, but I'm reflecting on words that he actually uttered. I'm not asking you to speculate on what he might secretly think. He said we could be like Norway or Switzerland. You said that's a soft Brexit. You also said nobody voted for a soft Brexit. So talk me through the logic of those three facts.
This is 3 years ago. Let's take the situation as it is now.
No, let's not, because you were telling me what people voted for 3 years ago.
Yes, well, what people have...
So if people voted to be like Norway or Switzerland, they were voting for a soft Brexit while simultaneously not voting for a soft Brexit. That's what you've said to me.
They voted to leave the European Union.
Be like Norway or Switzerland?
No, not at all. We were told...
Okay, well then you can deny reality, but the words came out of his mouth, Thomas. They came out of his mouth, just like the vote leave literature states that we will negotiate a deal. The last two manifestos that people pretended somehow represented a massive majority for continuing down this ludicrous path both stated that we'd negotiate a deal. You can tell me now, even though you never uttered the words no deal before October of 2016, you can tell me now that it's what you wanted all along, but you can't speak for anybody else. Do you understand that?
Yes, of course. But
Great. Well, we got there in the end. Luke is in Old Street. Luke, what would you like to say?
Hi, morning, James.
Hello.
Always good to speak to a fellow Amphifordian.
Carry on.
Basically, I wanted to kind of ask you a question, if I may.
It doesn't really work like
I wanted to ask... it's going to continue on to probably a little debate, so it's a good way of starting.
Well, I've been asking questions for an hour and 12 minutes.
All right, I'll let you ask me a question.
You ring in and answer
myself
them.
a question in that case.
Go on then.
The question is there any benefit to Brexit at this stage? That would be my question. And my answer to that would be the benefit to Brexit is that we are now able to negotiate trade deals, or preliminary trade deals, let's call them, with countries we wouldn't have been able to touch if we were inside the EU's jurisdiction.
How many trade deals do you think we currently have?
Well, South Korea, we signed a preliminary trade deal the other day, and we wouldn't have had access to South Korea.
We already do. They've rolled over the terms of the EU's deal with South Korea, Luke. It's literally a carbon copy of what had already been agreed between the European Union and South Korea.
But is that not a benefit to Brexit? Is that not a benefit?
Mate, you have to listen to the words that I just said. You said countries we wouldn't be able to touch as European Union members. For example, South Korea. The deal that Liam Fox announced last week is a rolling over of the deal that the European Union has with South Korea.
Yeah, exactly. That's where you just said it. The European has the deal with South Korea, not Britain.
You said it's a country we wouldn't be able to touch. We've already got a trade agreement with them.
Not in. Well, look, we're a service industry.
Did you really go to Ampleforth?
Yes, I did.
I think your parents deserve a refund. Glenn is in Barton-le-Clay in Bedfordshire. Glenn, what have you got?
Yeah, I mean, this might be the quickest phone call ever. You might be able to say yes or no to it. But if we've got... How many trade deals have we got? 144?
No, we've got 81 full trade agreements as members of the European Union. There are some under negotiation and on the way. It might have gone up to 82, actually, that, with...
Right.
But and then 7, according to the Financial Times, and I'm only parroting this, I couldn't tell you what they were, 759 other deals and arrangements in place that don't get described as full trade agreements.
Right. So can we keep those trade deals but be negotiating the tariffs rather than just leave...
No, because the whole point of having a full trade agreement is to have tariff-free trading.
But can we not... I mean, you know, I think...
You can't have tariffs and have tariff-free trading. You were right. It is a very short phone call.
It is. Play Estimate Bay again.
All right, I will.
It's in one of the continents abroad. We know we've got that airport where we can't take off and land because of the winds, the crosswinds there.
Are you happy, Glenn?
Yeah. I mean, talking about analogies...
You're right. Talk about analogies. Here's Estimate Bay talking about airports. Louis is in Uxbridge to steer us back towards Brexit. Louis, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello, mate.
Hello. There seems to be a lot of strong individual animosity towards deal or no deal individually, but the issue we've got is we've got blithering idiots in the Conservative Party that only seem to care about accelerating their own chance of survival. Now, what they first of all need to do is consider Nigel Farage's letter to the PM, which was to be part of the Brexit negotiations, because let's be honest, the Brexit Party, which I'm looking to become actively engaged in and visit the NEC in Birmingham on the 30th of June.
Yes.
These guys obviously know what they're doing, so they must have the best negotiating tactics on the table.
Why obviously do they know what they're doing?
Well, because Nigel Farage has been part of this European committee for years.
So which European committee?
Sitting on the table and giving these people a piece of... Sitting on the table and giving them
Which table? Which committee has he been a member of for years?
So moving back on to the point, what I'd like to say is Brexit means Brexit without delving into the political aspects upon it. Boris Johnson...
Without delving into the political aspects of Brexit?
Well, at the moment, yeah.
Okay, if I can just steer you back...
woken up.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
Are you sure you've woken up?
About half an hour ago, yeah. I've got to go to work in the afternoon.
We'll take your word for it. Just steer me back to what you said about the committee that he's been on for 25 years. Which committee are you referring to?
I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head.
Oh, well, that's unfortunate.
It is a little bit, yeah.
But what was the word you used to describe the people who were conducting the negotiations at the moment?
Blithering idiots. I mean, Boris Johnson couldn't find...
What was the name of that committee again?
Well, there you go. I suppose it could be the same steered in my direction, but there you go. Yeah. But Boris Johnson couldn't find Uxbridge with the sat-nav, and he runs this constituency which is falling to pieces every day. It's getting worse. It's just... And
how do you think leaving the European Union will improve conditions in Uxbridge, Louis?
Boosted back into the economy, money.
How would there be more money?
Freedom of movement will be controlled. Job market will rise considerably.
With fewer people, there'll be more jobs.
Yeah, it will. And
just talk me through the logic on that, because here's a finite number of jobs and here's a finite number of people. If we reduce the number of people, then the number of jobs will go up. Just talk me through that.
No, not reducing people and getting rid of them, but reducing. But what I mean by that is, I work in IT. In the IT industry, the market has become dead, and the pay scales are decreasing.
Yes.
And that is because you can outsource people from elsewhere, for instance, the EU, who will come in and work for next to nothing and go home and,
That's not really true, though, is it, Louis?
Oh, it is in my eyes. Listen, I'm a big
just
fan
because it's
of
true in your eyes, but of course you're a fan of Nigel Farage, because you clearly don't know what you're talking about.
I do know what I'm talking about. I've been stuck on this for ages.
Oh, good. What was that committee called again?
Oh, I don't know off the top of my head.
So why mention it? Or feel free to consult the bottom of your head if it helps.
As I say, I've just woken up. My brain's a little scrambled.
And as I said, are you sure that you've woken up? 11:38, because I think you've just had an anxiety dream. Why was Nigel Farage wrong in 2014 when he said, enough is enough, let people tell their jokes? Why was he wrong? Let's start with Claire in Sidcup. Claire, why was he wrong when he said, let people tell their jokes?
Well, I'm not talking about Nigel Farage, so firstly. Secondly, this left and right wing business...
I am, Claire, and it's my show.
Well, actually, you were talking about Joe Brand.
Yes, but I opened it up with a quote and said, this is true, isn't it? Let people tell their jokes. So why is that? Do you think people should be free to tell their jokes? Do you think Joe Brand has nothing to apologise for?
I think actually the show should be cancelled.
What's it called?
I don't. I've just come back from America.
No, but what's the show called? You're calling for a show to be cancelled. What's it called? You must know a lot about it.
All I know is that Joe Brand said something about...
What's the show called, Claire?
Over politicians.
What's the show called?
Do you think that's okay?
No, what's the show called?
Would you like acid thrown over you?
What's the show? Just, she also said Nick Clegg should be left face down on Hackney Marshes. I don't remember you ringing me about that.
Well, I've just come back from America and I'm disgusted by it.
What's the show called that you're disgusted by?
This whole left-wing, right-wing stuff is absolutely crap.
What's the show? What's the show called? What the show you're disgusted by that you think should be banned? What's it called?
Well, as I just said to you, I've just come back from America and it's all over the newspapers.
So brilliant. So what did they call it? What's the show called that you want banned?
Oh my God, you're really crazy, aren't you?
No, it's not called that. Try again.
Oh my God.
And there you have it, in a nutshell. I'm absolutely outraged by this show that I've never listened to and don't know the name of, because some people in newspapers and the media have told me that I should be outraged because it's some sort of left-wing conspiracy. Tom in Andover, have you been on hold all this time?
Yes, I have, yeah.
And you're still awake?
I am still awake.
Do you prefer listening to it on the phone as opposed to on your radio? Is it a more exciting experience for you? I'm amazed that you've been there for about half an hour.
Well, I sort of forgot about it and put you on speaker and just...
So it was just like having the radio on in the background.
Listening to the radio, you know.
And we rang you back, right? You're not paying for this.
No.
Oh, thank goodness for that. Just checking. So I can't remember what you rang in about. Can you?
Vaguely. It was on the subject of the Joe Brand joke and all the rest of it. And when I rang in, I was sort of thinking, I listen to your show pretty regularly. I am... You're going to jump down my throat, but I am a Leave voter. I am
going to jump down your throat.
To an extent, a fan of Nigel Farage.
Mate, it's pity that I feel. It's pity and love, not anger and negativity. What are you most looking forward to after we've left?
I think just the ability to make our own laws and the ability to...
Which laws don't you like at the moment?
So I'll look at one specific thing, just because you've asked me. I think the ability to deport people we don't want in the country without having to have reference
That's
to...
the European Court of Human Rights. That's not going to be effective.
I know it's separate to the EU, but it's a condition of entry to the EU.
So who do you want to deport that we haven't? Who do you want to deport that we're not allowed to?
Well, no one that I know of now, but I'm referring back to the Abu Hamza case.
He got deported.
Back to the Afghan hijackers in 2000.
They all got deported.
Yes, but there was an EU.
But you can't say to me, I want to be able to deport people we can't deport, and then give us your examples, people we deported. Well, that's legal process.
That's one element.
Go on, give me the other. So that's not a law, and we can deport them anyway. So what else? I'm not jumping down your throat. I'm just trying to help you see the light. So what else are you looking forward to, apart from being able to deport people we've deported?
I think the ability to make our own trade deals across the world.
How many trade deals do we currently have, do you think?
How many trade deals do we currently have?
Yeah.
I'm not an economist. I'm not an expert.
I'll say a number, and you say higher or lower. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and this isn't specific full trade agreements, all right? Because I'll tell you that we've got 81 of those, 81 full trade agreements in place already. But in terms of trade deals, various trade deals, I'll give you a clue. It involves 160 countries in various combinations and covering various areas. So let's start at 500 trade deals, higher or lower?
Lower.
It's higher. 600. Okay. 600 trade deals we've already got, higher or lower?
Well, I'm going to go with higher because...
Correct. 700 trade deals that we've already got with 160 countries, higher or lower? Higher or lower than 700, Tom?
Higher.
750 trade deals. 750 trade deals with 160 different countries, in addition to 81 full trade agreements, Tom. Higher or lower?
Higher, maybe?
You're right, mate. Well done. You see, 759 we've got with 160 different countries. What is it you're most looking forward to being able to do again?
Okay, so I'll explain
no, because
that.
people might have just tuned in. People might have just tuned in.
Contextualise my point about Joe Brand, but it's fine.
We'll get back to that. I'm glancing at the clock. I might bring you back after the break. But what was it you wanted to do again? Sign our own trade deals.
The reason I say that is because trade deals that we have through the EU.
Yes.
And I appreciate economies of scale. I appreciate the EU has a large amount of negotiating clout.
Yes.
But in the EU, we have to manufacture and produce within EU guidelines. And we do our trade as an EU country.
And if we get a full trade agreement with them, we'd have to carry on doing that.
Only with stuff that we were going to export to the EU. If we wanted to export to the American market, we could make things for the American market with that specifically in mind to their standards.
We can export
whatever those standards are.
Okay, so you want to have lower standards for stuff we sell to Americans.
I want to have variable standards for what we export to, around the world.
So, and how long do you think it will take to replace the 759 trade deals? And when they talk about rolling over the deals we've already got, you understand that involves accommodating exactly the same rules and regulations.
But it will be on our own terms, and it'll be our choice to do that.
That doesn't mean anything. It's our choice to do what we do now. It's our choice to be the part of the largest single market on the planet and sign up to 759 trade deals with 160 different countries. But you're right, we digress. Talk to me about Joe Brand.
Okay, well, as I say, that was just a sort of meat on the bones. And like I say, as we've just proved, I normally disagree with you, but I think you've hit the nail on the head with this. I think Nigel Farage sounds ridiculous by saying the police should look into it. It was a comment, it was a distasteful joke that I didn't find particularly amusing. She shouldn't have described it as a fantasy either.
Did you listen to the show, or have you just listened to the clip?
I've just listened to the clip.
Yes.
But I've watched Joe Brand stand up before. I've watched a lot of stand up, and most stand up is distasteful.
To someone it is, otherwise it won't be funny to someone else. So I understand that, and I actually think almost everybody who's honest is where you are, regardless of how they feel about various individuals or your own myths. But what you might be able to help me with this, what do people mean when they use the word left wing in the context of this conversation? When they say, oh, if it was the other way round, I don't know. I genuinely don't know what they mean, because the bloke who invented this programme is the same bloke who was very, very vocal in his defence of that UKIP candidate who taught his girlfriend's dog to do a Nazi salute.
Yeah, and I think...
But you describe yourself as someone who usually disagrees with me, so you're quite close to this notion of I disagree with lefties. What does that mean?
There is a left and a right wing, but I think it is in
how do you
context,
define it? How do you define the left and the right wing? What for you does left wing mean?
Well, to me, left wing means socialist, believing in a strong welfare state and stuff like that.
And you're opposed to that, are you?
Yeah, I'm a bigger believer in the free market and and that sort of thing.
So you're an economic analysis of left wing and right wing. You want a smaller welfare state.
Yeah, smaller state,
smaller NHS,
more private. And I would say so, but that's another
smaller NHS. What about when you get sick?
I think it still needs to be free at source, but I think the way the NHS is at the moment needs to be looked at.
Free at source is a socialist ideal.
It is, and
so you're actually in favour of socialism when it affects you directly in the context of your own health.
I think there are elements of socialism that we need in a modern society.
Well, that makes you left wing under your own analysis.
I'm not far right. I
didn't say you were. But I'm surprised that you think you're left wing, given that you admire Nigel Farage.
There are some elements of
that's all right, mate. Welcome aboard. There's plenty of room. Come and have a seat. Seriously, it's better late than never.